that makes it more complicated. So let's get started. So today, I do a series of workshops. This one is going to focus on how the past impacts our present. And the main way we're going to talk about that is something that I call scripts. And so, you can see here scripts when your past speaks before you do. And it's really just like those situations in life where you've gone into a conversation and then walked out of it, like wondering why you agreed to things that you didn't want to agree to. I think that's like the best example of it. But there are lots of other ways that we see scripts. And so I'm going to walk you through some of that. We'll go through all of that together. I'm going to be using, of course, now I'm hesitant to do it because I've had such poor luck technologically this evening, but I'm going to use the Q&A feature in the Google Meet. And that way you can ask questions, and then I'll take breaks after a few slides, and then I can review the questions and I can answer them for you. It's easier than trying to keep up with the chat because that can be really hard to do, and I prefer to not miss your questions if I can avoid that. So feel free to use the QA feature. If you're not sure where that is, it's on the bottom controls on the right-hand side there. And let's see. Okay, let's get going. Sorry. The only reason I look distracted is because there's still dozens of people trying to come in, and I just want to make sure I admit them. Okay. So first, let's talk about a little bit about me. We'll do this pretty quickly, but I have a license in, I have a master's in clinical psychology. Oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Let me try that again. I am a licensed master of social work. I also have a master's in family therapy, and I'm a trauma-informed coach. I do a lot of writing, and I do a lot of workshops like these. Usually they start off much more smoothly, so hopefully you'll give me another shot after this. And I do a lot about self-care. I do a lot about overcoming trauma, and I do work on using AI for your mental health, personal growth, and self-care. I think most of you have gotten my free self-care guide, but I will share this slide deck with you probably tomorrow, along with when I have the video ready. And so you can, if you haven't gotten the guide yet, you can sign up and get the free guide. I also have written a book called Fatherhood in 40-Minute Snapshots, and which is available on Amazon. But more exciting for me is I'm publishing my memoir in my rearview mirror in probably late fall or early 2026. And a lot of what I talk about in this workshop are things that I learned from not just my professional training, but also having lived through this and overcome my own various traumas. So you'll see some of that, and if you want to stay involved with me, hopefully you'll be hearing more about the announcement of this book in the next couple of months. Okay, so let's talk about kind of the process of healing. My assumption is that most of you here because you have some sense of being affected by trauma in some way, and you know that your past is impacting your present. And so one of the best ways traditionally to deal with that has been to really delve into your past, uncover these dark memories, and see how that impacts you. And frankly, I spent a lot of years doing that. And it's pretty horrible. I'm not going to lie to you about it. I think some of that was really necessary, but I think also one of the things that we learned over the years is that we don't have to delve into all of our memories to understand how our past is our present. And this is going to be the key to the workshop tonight. really the most important thing, understanding how our past plays out in our daily life, right? So a good example of this are scripts, which again, I'll get to in a second. But the first step to really understanding how you're impacted by your past is to really develop a sense of metacognition. And metacognition is basically a really fancy way of saying a higher level of self-awareness. The reason, sorry, Maria, did you have a question?
No, I'm fine now. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I got in. Yeah.
So metacognition is really being able to observe, understand, and regulate our own thinking processes. And right, so that's essentially thinking about thinking. But what does that actually mean? I like to think of it this way, and there's some really good mindfulness approaches, stories, tales about how this works. But one of the ways to think about it is the difference between standing in a river with a flood of thoughts and emotions coming at us, knocking us off balance, making it very difficult for us to stay focused, to remember what it is that we want and we need. And then metacognition, this higher self-awareness, is the ability to step out of that flood of thoughts and feelings, stand on the side of the bank and watch them go by, be able to observe them, to acknowledge them, to see how they're affecting us without getting lost in them. I'm not saying this, that it's something really easy to do, or that it's, it's only going to take you a couple of seconds of practice and then you'll be great at it. It does take time, but it's one of those really cool things that once you start to do it, it really builds on itself well. Because as you become more aware of what you're thinking and why you're thinking, it becomes easier to become more aware of how and what and why you're thinking. So a few other reasons that it's also really helpful is that I like to think of it as our past, like the things that we've experienced in our past, what that has done is it's created these scripts. It's made us react instead of respond. And that's a really key difference. And frankly, one of the biggest differences in my life in terms of how my life has changed is the ability to be able to respond in the way that I want instead of reacting from the way that I was essentially trained growing up. An example of that is, someone says something obnoxious to you, it's hurtful, it's hurtful, and instead of lashing back out, which is a kind of a natural reaction, you're able to think about it and go, oh, this person is, sorry, I just got a weird message, I apologize. So if someone says something obnoxious to you, your response, you can respond in a kind of an attacking way, right? Or even respond in a defensive way. React in a defensive or way. And so, but if you're responding, that gives you space. And that's really what it's all about. We just want a little bit of space to be able to choose how we respond to situations. So, I think let's use this fun experience that we've had this evening, the difficulty in getting on here, right? You can see that it is distracting me and that there are issues that keep popping up. But I keep trying to think about, okay, but I love this stuff. This is what I want to do all the time with my life, is talk about this. And I still want everybody here to get something out of it. So I feel uncomfortable. I feel weird. I'm embarrassed that this has happened. And I feel badly that it's impacting your experience of this event. But I'm also able to say, okay, let's hold on to that. But I'm going to still respond from a place of, I want this to be well. I want this to be a good experience for you. And so I hope that makes sense. I just kind of wanted to use this live example of what's happening in my brain because I think it's a good example. It's helpful to see how it happens in the real world. Mizanette, did you have a question? Okay. So the other things are, right, like metacognition is really helpful in terms of thinking about healing from our trauma. Again, it's really good about being able to choose how we respond to situations. And it's incredibly helpful in terms of gaining insight. All of this is about how do we figure out how to understand how what happened to us in the past impacts the way we are in the present so that we can feel better, function better, not act from a place of when we were younger, but act from a place of all the work we've done as adults. So let's start talking about scripts, because that's exactly why we're here, right? Scripts are exactly what they sound like, right? They are automatic responses. But the problem is no one handed us a script and said, here's your lines, you need to learn them. We were raised this way. We were essentially kind of trained to respond to the world in this way, right? So they're automatic responses that we learned very early on. And it's not just one script. We have multiple scripts. So we can have scripts layered on scripts, layered on scripts. And that's one of the reasons why it's challenging to understand the difference between this is just the way I am, which we'll get to in a second. This is the way I am, and this is me essentially reading from a script. This is all about unconscious patterns. We didn't choose these patterns, but we certainly feel frustrated, angry. We can feel shame about these responses that we do, but it's not our fault. It's just the way that we were taught. It's how we learned how to survive whatever situation that we went through. So as this is going on, you can see that that metacognition is a really valuable tool in kind of essentially exposing these scripts to the light of day so that we can see how they're impacting us and then what we can do about it. There are many different ways that we use scripts in our lives. I like to think about it in terms of like genres, right? So when someone asks us to do something, we often have an automatic reaction on how we should answer that, whether that is good for us or not. You know, it's how we talk to a new person, it's how we deal with conflict, it's how we handle authority, it's how we're dealing with difficult emotions, it's whether we stand up for ourselves or not, it's how we prioritize ourselves versus how we prioritize the feelings and needs of others. All of these are just different ways that these scripts play out in our life. And they essentially define how we handle these situations. And I think what's really important to remember and understand is that this is learned behavior. This is not a failure of your personality or your brain or anything like that. These are just things that you learned how to do because of the way that you grow up, the experiences that you had growing up. I'm just going to take a quick look at the Q&A to see if anyone has sent in any questions. So Jeremy, who obviously has an incredible name, asks, for those of us that have been through any various levels of therapy years ago, sorted through our former trauma, and then have to return to it years later, what do you recommend for us? I have lots of things to say on this subject, Jeremy. I will try to keep them limited. But I think first, the hardest part about recovering from trauma is that it is not linear, meaning it doesn't just go up, right? The second part that makes it really challenging is that the way that our trauma impacts us changes based on our life experiences. So I'll give you a good example, and this is something that I write about in my memoir. That when I had kids, when my kids were born, I had already done a lot of work, and I thought that I was relatively okay. But parenting my children ended up being such a trigger for me, and ended up really highlighting the difference between the way I had been treated and the way I was treating them. And that was really difficult, and it brought up a lot of stuff. So even though I was doing better, here I was again dealing with more of these issues from my childhood. It's not failure. It's just that as we grow and change, the way that we experience our past and what happened to us changes as well. So this is where I really emphasize things like self-care and self-awareness, metacognition, because I think it's crucial to build this awareness of yourself so that you can be better attuned to your experiences and what's happening. A lot of the time, we don't do enough on a daily basis to keep ourselves okay, to keep ourselves feeling safe, to process our emotions. And so they build up. And as they build up, it becomes a weight that is hard for us to carry. So I know this sounds like I'm pitching, but next week, the workshop I'm doing is on my backpack and soul points theories. And it's basically the idea of like what during the day weighs us down, what during the day drains us, and what can we do about that? How can we take care of ourselves while not letting things build up so much that it makes life so much harder for us to deal with? So, Jeremy, I'm not sure if that answers everything, but it certainly covers some of it. I'm happy to talk more about it if you'd like. So DeLong asks, and then I'll get back to the presentation, but DeLong asks, in a relationship, do you think scripts are determined by our partner? For example, my girlfriend expects me to agree with her. When she criticizes me, it seems that this script is her rule, not my choosing. Okay, so without getting into the details of your relationship, right? I think it is important to remember that as much as I have a ton of scripts, so does any person that I'm with and dealing with, right? They have their own scripts. The challenge is figuring out how to manage our own scripts so that the other person can more easily manage their scripts. I think the issue of whether or not, like the thing for you to think about, DeLong, is I think, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, is to really think about what that expectation brings up in you, how it impacts you, and how you end up responding to it. Because the truth of the matter is, most of us get together with people because our traumas fit really well together. We just don't see it, right? It just clicks together, and then we feed each other, we help each other, we support each other, but it also can cause us a lot of challenges. So that is something for a whole other workshop that I will talk about in some other day. There are a bunch more questions. I want to get to those questions. I want to finish I want to make sure I cover everything in the presentation. And then I'm also really happy to stay on after 8 o'clock and do more questions, particularly because we started late, for which again, I humbly apologize, but also because I, in case you haven't noticed, I love talking about this, and I'm happy to just keep talking about it till the end of time. Okay, so we talked about script genres. Let's get to how they form, right? So it seems really simple. Some of the scripts are just like manners, right? Those are the things that our parents taught us, right? They explicitly said it. You should say please and thank you on the table. You should, whatever it is, right? Those kinds of things, those are much more easy to deal with. It's much easier to deal with them because they're explicit. Even if we don't remember learning them, we know we learned them. The other two are more difficult to challenge. So one is modeling, right? That is, we see the way that our parents handle their emotions. We see the way that our parents handle conflict. We see the way that our parents handle work and personal life and etc., right? And we absorb that as kids. That's just what we do, right? That's our job as kids, is basically to be a sponge and just absorb whatever's around us. Unfortunately, good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. So modeling is challenging because in some ways it's tied to the way we think we should be as an adult. Protection is really about the things we learned from being hurt, right? So did we learn that it's much easier to just agree to everything because there was less conflict, or people were less likely to get mad at us or upset with us? You know, is it easier to avoid conflict? Is it easier to put other people in front of myself because if I meet their needs, they're less likely to hurt me, right? There's all kinds of ways that we do protection as a kid that makes total sense because that's what we needed to do. It's just that as adults, these same things that we learned end up hurting us. And it's not, again, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's not because you learned something wrong. It's because you learned a powerful way to survive whatever experiences you went through. And then grew up and are finding out that those same tools, those same skills are not helpful anymore. That's really the challenge that you're facing. It's not that there's something broken. It's that you've learned a set of skills that were really excellent for surviving a very difficult situation. They are not so excellent now when you want to try and change your life for something better. So I'm going to just tell you a quick story, an example of how these scripts are. When I was in my mid-20s, I was actually coming out of a really deep depression, and worst one I had in my life. And I was getting to the point where I was kind of ready to go outside again. I wasn't even really leaving the apartment much at all. And I was getting ready to go outside again and was thinking, okay, this would be a really cool way. I love flowers. It would be neat to learn more about flowers. I could maybe volunteer at a florist for like a couple days a week, get out of the house, do something, excuse me, but also not be too intense, not feel a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, things like that. So I reached out to a florist, and they brought me in for an interview, and I went in, and the guy basically was like, I want you to come here. I want you to work all the time, and we're not going to pay you. And I walked in with this idea that I would work maybe 2 days a week just to learn. And I walked out having agreed to, I had already agreed to this with him, having agreed to working 5 days a week for free. And I was broken up. Like it was, I didn't want this to happen. I went in with the idea of what I wanted, and I still ended up doing what he wanted. To me, that's a script about how I put others' needs in front of my own. That's what he needed. He wanted free help. And it's hard to blame him. But that's not what I wanted. But I agreed to what he wanted because That's the way I was built, right? That's the way I was raised. That's the way I was taught. Now, thankfully, I was able to realize what happened. I was able to talk to people about it. I gave him a call. I left him a voicemail that said, I'm happy to do 2 days a week, but I'm not going to work full-time for free. And not surprisingly, I never heard from him again. But I think this is a really good example of how it happens in real life. We just agree to things that we don't even intend to agree on. It's almost as if it's a blur. And I think the blur part, the way it happens so fast, is because this is a script that's already pre-written and we're just following it. Again, that's not a flaw of ours. We've learned this. We're good at it. It's just that we need new skills now that we're adults living in a different world. Okay, so story time is over. Why scripts are hard to see. Excuse me. Again, you learned scripts. We learned scripts as we learned language. Right? We learned these scripts as we were growing up, as we were imprinting everything on our brain. So it doesn't feel like a lesson that we learned. It feels so natural. The other key thing that I really want to emphasize is that you're not thinking I was taught to do this. What you're thinking is, this is just the way I am. When I walked out of the florist, I was like, this is me. Like, this is my problem. This is the problem with who I am, is that I agree with whatever other people want, even if it hurts me. But the truth is, it's not who I am. It's who I learned to be. And I can change that. But the key to changing it is first that awareness, right? That metacognition of, this is what happened. Now, this is why it happened. And this is what I need to start thinking about in order to change it moving forward. Any questions so far? I'm going to take a look at the QA just to make sure. So M asks, what would be the difference between, Renee, give me 1 second. What would be the difference between being in tune to metacognition versus recognizing we are only able to control ourselves and forget the rest? No, that totally makes sense. I think they're two different fronts, so to speak, in the same battle, right? The serenity prayer is great in the sense of being able to understand what we have control over and being able to exercise control over that. Metacognition, what I like about metacognition is, I argue there's more that we can control. And that's what metacognition helps. So there's a certain kind of acceptance to the serenity prayer, which I totally understand and value. But I think what's also really important is that through metacognition, we can expand what we, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Just, I needed to mute somebody real quick. So the serenity prayer, in terms of the accepting the things that I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can, is great. I also believe, though, that metacognition allows us to have a greater range of what we can change about ourselves. And that greater range is so much more empowering and gives us a real ability to make dramatic and significant changes in our life. And that's where I think the value of metacognition is. So hopefully, and that answered your question. So Miguel asks, what's the difference between scripts and personality? And I think that's a fantastic question. And completely honest with you, it is challenging to see the difference, because you developed your personality as you were growing up. and you learned these scripts as you were growing up. And it's easy to think that scripts are just the way you are. Here's where I would make the distinction. Anything that seems like it causes you harm is probably a script. Anything that is good for you or feels good for you is probably part of your personality. Your personality isn't developed to be harmful and hurtful to yourself. I don't believe as humans that we're built like that. I do believe as humans, when we grow up in difficult situations, we learn skills and habits and techniques that can hurt us when we're older, even though at the time they were very much helpful in terms of saving us, protecting us, keep minimizing the damage that we were experiencing. So again, the easiest way for me to think about scripts is if there's a negative, self-destructive, hurtful component to it, it's probably a script and not your personality. Renee, thank you for your patience. I apologize.
So no problem. I just wanted to say that myself and a lot of other people went to the wrong website or something. Well,
Yes.
We had the wrong address. I didn't know if you were aware of that. So I just joined you about 35 minutes ago. Is there any way that I could pick up what I've missed in the last 35 minutes, which sounds like it's been a lot?
The recording will be available. I'll share it
Great.
tomorrow.
Thank you.
And also you can always just ask me any questions. That everybody had that problem, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't just you. It
Okay.
was clearly the system was not happy with me today and made all of you suffer the consequences of that. So
Okay.
again, I'm really sorry about that.
So you've changed your script then with the system.
Yes, or I will certainly. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So let's move on to the next piece. We're getting closer to the end of this, and then we can really delve into questions. So again, one of the keys, right, is to be able to notice your scripts. So one of the ways to do that is to think about, one, those autopilot moments. So I described the time when I went to the florist, right? I don't remember actually talking to the florist. I remember thinking I have a plan to go talk to the florist. And I remember walking out of the florist going, what the hell just happened? I don't want to do this. But I don't really remember the actual conversation itself. And I think that's because I was an autopilot. It was a blur to me because I was playing out a script that I didn't even understand at the time. So one of the ways to really tell is when you start responding automatically as if you're on autopilot. Another way of thinking about it is emotional patterns. So for me, again, just to use me as an example, one of my things that I learned growing up is that other is more important than self. That was how I learned to take care of others so that I felt safer and more protected. And that's kind of how I've dealt with most of my life. Other, more important than self. So that's a pattern. Anytime that I'm in a situation where I know that I'm putting someone else in front of what I want, then I think what I'm sorry. So when I'm putting myself in a situation that isn't good for me because I'm trying to meet someone else's needs, I know that pattern is part of a script. And so I know that, okay, I need to take a step back and really think about what it is that I want, not what it is I think I should do. The other part of this is identifying triggers. So just another example, I'm not so great with bosses. Bosses are very triggering for me. So I know that my scripts are kind of in overdrive when I'm going to deal with someone who's in a position of authority over me. And so being able to learn the situations where you're likely to get triggered, where you're likely to have a script start, also helps you prepare for how you're going to deal with it. So there's kind of 2 points of this, right? One is you want to be able to be as prepared as possible. And again, we're not striving for perfection. We're just striving for change, right? We're just striving to make things a little bit easier for you. So if you know that there are certain situations that make you more emotionally challenged, that upset you, that are triggering, knowing that ahead of time can help you prepare in advance. That's one piece. 2, when you're on that autopilot phase, when you're dealing with someone, if you can start to learn what that feels like, be aware, oh, okay, here, I'm just talking without even thinking, without even registering what's happening, then you know that that's probably a script that's happening. And you can start thinking about how do you pause so that you can start acting from your own place versus using the script that you've done your whole life. And then the third part of it is when it's over, do an assessment. How did you feel? Did you feel like you were really acting from your own place? Did you walk out of there? Like I walked out of the floors going, that was terrible. That was not what I wanted. But then I had a chance to say, okay, but I'm not going to go through with it because that's not good for me. And I backed out and I went and did something else. So also understanding that even though you may have committed to something that you're not comfortable doing, it doesn't mean that you've committed your whole life. It just means that in that moment you committed, but you can change your mind. You can decide what you want to do and how you want to respond. And that's the distinction between acting from scripts and acting from yourself. Let's go to the next one. So obviously when we're talking about scripts, it's fun to use the phrase rewriting your scripts. I think there's something very empowering about the idea that we can rewrite our own scripts. The first thing that's really important is it's not your fault. And I know I've touched on this before, but I'll say it again. It's not your fault. You're doing these things not because there's something wrong with you, not because there's some fundamental flaw in your personality. What you're doing these things because you learned them as a coping mechanism, as a survival skill to get through whatever happened in your life. That's great. Imagine if you hadn't learned that. It would have been a disaster. Whatever you went through would have been so much worse. But somehow your brain figured it out. And it figured out a way to take care of yourself and how to protect yourself and get through what probably was a really horrible, terrible experience. The only problem is that now when you're trying to deal with life that is very different from the way it was back then, we're still acting as if it's exactly the same. And that's the challenge. It's not that you're doing something wrong, it's just that it no longer serves you. So what we want to do is start to be aware of when it happens and how we can start to change it. The other piece of that is that just because this is the way you've always done it, it doesn't mean that's the way you always will do it. Yeah, you learned it when you were a kid. And of course, anything you learn as a child is harder to unlearn as an adult, but that doesn't mean that you can't unlearn it. It doesn't mean that you can't write your own script. And you don't have to do them all at once. Just start with one. Just start with that metacognition piece. Start with building your sense of awareness of when you are playing into those scripts. And then you can work on how do you start to change them. You can always practice new responses. So another workshop that I'm doing in 3 weeks, I think, is on using AI to practice being with other people. And so I'm calling this the rehearsal room, that working with AI can help you practice how you want to set boundaries, how you want to stand up for yourself, how you want to express your feelings. AI is a safe place to be able to do that before you go and practice it in the real world. So that's literally a whole other workshop that we can talk about another time, but it's part of the way of thinking about how do you practice rewriting these scripts so you can change them for the future. Part of what you need to do is, okay, Danielle, can you put that in the Q&A? I'd like to address that question, but I want to finish up first. So part of what it is, part of the challenge is that you need to give yourself permission to write something new, right? We grew up not having choice, right? We learned these things because we had to. We didn't learn them because it was like fun and cool. We learned them because this was the way our brain adapted to whatever situation we were in order to get ourselves through what we shouldn't have had to gone through in the first place. Now you need to give yourself permission to write something new. And this is what change is all about. So you don't have to be who you were trained to be. You can be who you are. I believe, and I believe this extremely strongly, that the work of healing, this journey of healing from trauma, is not about becoming somebody else. It's about becoming who you always were. It's just that who you were got stuff piled on top of it from the experiences you had to deal with and go through. But who you are is still pretty awesome. It's just that we gotta uncover the crap that got on top of it. So you're not trying to be somebody else, you're trying to be you. You want to be able to give yourself permission to say, hey, I can live the way I want to live. I get to make choices about my life, because you do. And you get a chance to be able to write something new. And partly as someone who has written his own memoir about what I went through growing up, there's something so powerful about rewriting that narrative from my perspective. And this is that first step, part of that. So that's it. I'm going to run through a couple slides about me and about next steps, and then we'll open the floor to questions. I know we're done at 8. If you need to leave at 8, you are welcome to, obviously. If you want to stick around and ask questions, I'm not going anywhere. We're just getting to the good stuff. Okay, so first, thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate it. I really, really, really appreciate your patience and understanding of our earlier catastrophe. And I thank you for your patience. And so if you don't mind, if you still have something nice to say, feel free to go on to Meetup or Eventbrite and rate and review. Here are some of my upcoming workshops. So I probably have 7 or 8 workshops coming up over the next 3 months. These are the next 4. So next week, focusing on what are you carrying, naming what drains and restores you. So I'll be talking about my backpack theory and soul points in terms of how we think about self-care on a daily basis. And if you've been through trauma, self-care is absolutely crucial. Jeremy, you'd like 65,349 more workshops. I will do my best. So I'm got 7. So, you know, we're gonna chip away at that, I promise. In 3 weeks, there's the rehearsal room using AI to practice real life interactions with people. And then in September, I'll be talking about You Matter Too, the science and practice of self-compassion. You can see how with scripts, particularly, self-compassion can be really valuable, because we don't want to be beating ourselves up for things that we learned as a child. We want to be able to understand and be caring with ourselves, because who else is going to do that for us if it's not us? So on September 11th, I'll talk about that. And then the whole You learning to navigate your inner voices, this will be the first time I'm doing a workshop like this. We'll be talking about internal family systems, which is an approach particularly for people who are struggling with trauma, where you have all of these different parts inside of you, and the goal is really to kind of understand and communicate with them to help you feel better. So if you like this workshop, I think that workshop may even be better, and hopefully technologically it will be smoother. And again, if you didn't get my self-care guide, I believe you should have, but if you didn't, let me know. Also, I do coaching. I do one-on-one coaching. But for people that join my workshops, I offer a 30-minute free clarity call. This is not a call where I'm selling you on what I can do. This is essentially a mini session where you talk about what's going on. I tell you my perspective. You can ask me any questions about the way that I work or my process. But at the end of the day, you get 30 minutes, it's free, and you decide whether or not you want to continue working with me or not. You can do that at my website. You can schedule that at my website at buildonyourstrengths.com/contact. Okay, Emily, we'll figure that out. We'll figure out how to make sure you get that. I'll include, you know what I'll do? I'll include a link to get the guide tomorrow when I send it around, so that everyone can get access to it if you haven't already had access to it. And I'll send this deck around. And then the last thing is just a little bit about me, which we don't have to go through because, that was fun. Okay, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see oh, look at all these faces. Okay. I'm going to start going through some of the questions in the Q&A. Again, please, if you need to go ahead. I won't take any offense, but if you want to stick around, we're going to have some fun. So Shane early on said, what are your thoughts on sex, love, validation addiction, and how past trauma creates neural pathways to drive this behavior? If it's happening in a partnership, could it be because it's the wrong partner, or just something you individually need to sort out as a person? Okay, so a lot here. Let me just say that let's assume that everything that we're doing in terms of the way we're dealing with the world, dealing with relationships, starts with what we've been through ourselves. Yes, who we choose as a partner can impact our issues, our challenges, but most of the reason we are the way we are is because of the way that we were raised and the way that we grew up and the experiences of what happened to us. So any kind of sex, love, validation addiction is going to be primarily driven from a past where we didn't feel that. We didn't feel that connection. Maybe we didn't feel unconditional love. We didn't, it's interesting. I think a lot of people don't really, particularly those who've experienced trauma, fully understand kind of the power of unconditional love. Being loved conditionally is terribly cruel. And the reason I say that is because you don't know if you're loved at any moment. So every day is like Groundhog Day. You wake up and you're like, okay, I got to get these people to love me. I got to prove that I'm lovable. I got to make sure that they show me that they love me. Otherwise, maybe they don't. That is a difficult way to live. It's a hard way to function. That is not because there's something wrong with you. That's because of the way that you grew up and what you experienced. So all of that is going to come out of your past. The challenge is we may end up with someone who triggers that within us perfectly, because that's how our brains work. It's really annoying and it's frustrating, but the truth is we're going to find somebody who matches our sense of like if you grew up with someone that is loved you conditionally, meaning that there were times where they loved you and there were times where they didn't love you, and that you could feel the difference between when they pulled that away and when they gave it to you, you're just more likely to find someone who does that as well. Maybe they won't do it the same way, it'll look different, but it'll be very similar. So again, if you're seeing that, what's the word I'm looking for? If you're seeing that kind of expand more with a partner, it may be because the experience you're having with the partner is more triggering for you. I hope that makes sense. Brian asked, what would you recommend to stop ruminating? I've been ruminating about a situation that happened well over a year ago. It's been mentally draining to let go and over. Yeah, Brian, that's horrible. Ruminating is just so nasty. But you know what really helps ruminating? Metacognition. And the reason I say that is because metacognition gives you the ability to go, oh, wait a second. Here I am. I'm thinking about the same thing over and over and over again. What can I do about that? So there are a few reasons why that might happen. One, there's a sense of shame involved, right? Whatever it is that you did or didn't do, or someone said or didn't say, that triggers you this sense of shame, and that's hard to get rid of. And so it just keeps coming back and you're just playing it over in your head. Two, it's an issue of safety. It can be an issue of safety. So when we were younger, we would try to learn how to get out of the painful situations that we were in. When we're ruminating, that's kind of what we're doing, right? We're reviewing that situation over and over again, trying to think about, can we do something better? The issue is not, can we do something better? The issue is now, in the present, how safe do you feel? Because you more likely than not don't feel safe in the present. You're feeling this sense of unsafety from your past. Again, this is like a whole other like 3 hours that we could talk about, which I probably should spare you that this evening because you've been already so patient. But ruminating is a lot about kind of shame. It's about safety. It's about our brains getting stuck. I think of it as like my brain eating itself. It just like turns on itself and just starts grinding away. There isn't a solution to ruminating as much as there is a way of processing it. One, you want to be able to catch it as soon as you can. Ruminating has this way of building momentum, and the more momentum it gets in eating itself, the worse the ruminating gets, right? So a key part of that is awareness. The sooner we can catch it, the sooner that we can say, oh, okay, look at that, I'm ruminating again. Just even the act of saying I'm ruminating again will help. But then it's also just about, okay, well, how do I distract myself? There's nothing to solve, right? The ruminating isn't to figure something out. The ruminating is because you're stuck reviewing a situation. There's nothing to get from that. So what you really need to do more than anything else is distraction. Finding something else, whether that's music, whether it's a TV show, whether it's reaching out to a friend, whatever it is. But again, I'm going to start with that self-awareness, that metacognition that makes a huge difference in your ability to notice the rumination and then be able to remember, oh, when I'm ruminating like this, here are the 6 things I know that can help me. Maybe it's exercising, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's watching TV, maybe it's listening to music. Whatever it is for you, that's where the benefit of metacognition comes in, because it'll help you be aware of the ruminating and then help you figure out what you can do in that situation. And just even that will feel more empowering than, feeling helpless about the fact that you can't stop yourself from ruminating. So I hope that made sense. Devora, the link will be available tomorrow. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to get your name right, but Pritileka said, so is it okay to own multiple personalities based on situations, not for people pleasing or manipulation, just for personal coping mechanism? Is it smart, or is you're just fooling yourself? Well, so first, let's kind of talk about like the whole concept of, is it smart, fooling yourself? Let's really focus on, is it healthy for you or is it unhealthy for you? Because that's all that really matters. What is right for me may not be right for you. What's healthy for me may not be healthy for you. All that matters is what's healthy for you. That's one of the key things, is like, I don't think that there is a template that you can like give to someone and say, okay, this is everything that's going to make you feel better. You can give options and we can talk about them, but we have to customize those options to your needs so that you figure out what feels healthy for you. Okay. I wouldn't think about it as multiple personalities, putting aside the like, multiple personality disorder, right? I wouldn't think of it as multiple personalities, but what I think happens is that in various situations, different parts of yourself, different scripts are being triggered. And that's what's kind of controlling the way that you are acting. The more comfortable you get with yourself, the more we're able to unload all of the kind of crap that is sitting on top of who you really are. That's when you start to be able to decide, oh, it's not so much different scripts or different triggers or whatever it is. It's just, I'm going to be me through all of these different ways of interacting with the world. That takes some time, it takes some work, but it's absolutely doable. And again, it's based on the premise that you already are who you need to be to help yourself. It's just that because of what happened to you, you're carrying a lot of weight on top of that. And so it's hard to see that. Miguel asks, is there any difference between a script and a belief? Excuse me. I would say yes. I would say absolutely. I would say a script is essentially a practice, a skill that we developed growing up to protect ourselves. That's really what scripts are. That's what triggers are, right? Like when we get triggered by something, we're getting triggered because this situation feels so similar to a situation I felt when I was younger. And the only way I know how to deal with that is to act in this way, which is that skill that you learned. And I think, I don't know if Danielle, no, it doesn't look like it. So Danielle asked a question earlier that I'm gonna tie in here, which was, darn it, I know I'm not gonna get it right. Which was, no, I just lost it. Renee asked if script is a psychoanalytic term. No, I made it up. Danielle, if you're here, if you don't mind either posting or sharing the question you asked earlier that I am now totally blanking on, that would be great.
I did. It's just under anonymous. It's a little further down.
Oh. Okay, great. Thank you. So there was another question earlier that talked about, oh, that's what it was. There was a question earlier that asked how can something that is self-sabotaging be protective? And I think that's a fabulous question. And yes, like, it's so hard to comprehend how these things that as adults feel like they restrict us so much could have been so valuable to us when we were growing up. So let's just take a few minutes and talk about that. When we were growing up, we weren't trying to, how to think about this. When we were growing up, we weren't in a position where we could learn the best way to do everything, right? Because of whatever traumas we experienced, whatever adversity, whatever difficulties we experienced, our brains shifted into, okay, we're not getting what we needed and we're getting hurt. So we need to figure out how to protect ourselves. And again, this isn't conscious. This is kind of one of the extraordinary things about the brain, right? Our brains just did this. They just went, hey, our needs are not being met. We're not being cared for in the way that we need. We have to do something to protect ourselves. So a good example that people think about a lot is like when there's intimacy, like when you are trying to build an intimate relationship with someone and you start to get scared and you back away, even though the thing that you really want the most is that connection with a partner, but you're running away from it because it's scaring the heck out of you, right? That feels very self-sabotaging. That is absolutely a protective mechanism. It's not protecting you now, but it is a protective mechanism, right? When you were growing up, you learned that in order to take care of yourself, in order to prevent further harm from happening to you, you had to keep your distance from people. Of course you did. You were being hurt in some way, right? So your brain said, no, well, the solution to that is let's keep people at a distance, because if we get too close, we get hurt. Now, sure, you're now an adult and you'd really like to feel and experience intimacy with another person, that emotional intimacy, that connection, that unconditional love that you've been longing for. Sure. But there's still a big part of you that's like, no, there's absolutely no way we're going to do that. That is terrifying. I am scared beyond belief. And so it backs away. That's how it looks like, right? In your present, that looks like self-sabotage. But in your past, that was self-protective. You did that to help yourself. You did that to protect yourself from being hurt more. How you deal with that now, that's the real challenge, right? Again, first, that metacognition piece, that self-awareness piece of being able to be aware of that, right? Too often, people get in that situation, and then it's months down the road, and they're like, why did I screw up that relationship? And by that point, it may be too late to do something about it. So the more aware you are that, okay, when I get emotionally intimate with someone, that I get terrified, and when I get terrified, I run away, then you begin to not have to react, but you're able to respond. And I hope that makes sense. That's the goal of all of this work, is to build your awareness so that you have the chance to be able to say, okay, this is my reaction, but it's not what I want to do anymore. I want to do it differently. Okay, I hope that helped. So again, the guy with the great name, Jeremy, said, I feel like to rewrite something new that you are in a bad situation, it may be smart to remove yourself from that situation in order to learn and grow and successfully rewrite the script. So, excuse me. I had to postpone this workshop last week because I was sick, and I'm still not fully better. So yes, if you're, I should have said this earlier, I'm working on the assumption that most of us are in a place in our lives where the danger and threat of what we went through is in the past. If you are currently in an unsafe situation, that if you're currently, I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Jeremy's comment. If you're currently in a situation that is unsafe, everything is different, right? Priority is safety. Priority is taking care of yourself. It's really hard to grow when you're still dealing with the same situation. That's a completely separate issue. If you need help figuring that out, let me know. For those of us who are still acting out of a place of unsafety, even though we're currently in a place that is more safe, that's where you're able to really rewrite the scripts. And that's where you can start thinking about, again, it's the metacognition. I know I probably said this word 135 times tonight, but it is the key to everything. So that metacognition of being aware of it, and also, and I'm going to tie this in, self-care is so crucial, especially to those of us that have been through trauma. I'll cover this again next week, but we need more than people who didn't experience trauma. We need more self-care. We need more time for ourselves. We need more time for healing and rejuvenation than people who didn't have a difficult childhood. Those are just, it's reality that we live with. How you use self-care is really important in terms of how do you remind yourself that you are safe now? Because it's so easy to forget that we're in a safe, that we're now safe because we weren't safe back then. How do you deal with what drains you? How do you process the emotions that are affecting you all the time? I'll give you a preview of next week. So one of the things I talk about is a backpack. And it's like we all walk around in this life carrying a backpack. And what that means is that, or what I think about that is, we're all carrying around weights in our backpack. When we get up in the morning, we'll put our backpack on, we go throughout the day, we get home at night, we go to sleep, we get up, we put our backpack on again. We're always carrying it with us. What ends up in our backpack are a few things. One, and again, I'm just going to cover this next week, but you get a free preview, even though next week's workshop is free as well. So it's not a huge deal for you, but pretend for my sake. So one is all the interactions we have during the day. Those of us that experienced trauma when we were growing up, interactions with humans are just harder. I think about it as the wounds and slights that we deal with on a daily basis. Maybe other people aren't as affected by them, but we are. So the wounds and slights that we deal with, those weights get into our backpack. We have a difficult situation with a boss. We have a difficult situation with a partner or a friend. Something doesn't work out in our jobs or whatever it is. We're having a tough time being parents, right? All of that, all of those are weights. They're just put right in our backpack. The problem for people like us who grew up in a difficult situation is that we're already carrying the weight of our childhood. And that's what makes it particularly challenging. So it seems like, why can't I handle this simple thing at work or this simple thing with a friend? But in reality, it's like, okay, someone hands you a 10-pound weight and you're like, okay, well, I can handle a 10-pound weight, except for the fact that you're already handling 120 pounds. Someone else gives you 10 more pounds. It's like, okay, but 10 pounds doesn't feel like a lot. But when you're already carrying so much, it feels enormous. Self-care is that process of going through those weights, figuring out what they are, processing them, and releasing them so you're not carrying as much. That's another way that you get to start being able to really rewrite the scripts. because the more you can take care of yourself during the day, the more you're able to use whatever energy you have for things like developing new skills like metacognition and self-awareness. And as you build those skills, you become more aware, and it becomes easier for you to deal with these situations. Dealing with these situations then has less weight associated with them. And everything just starts to get a little bit easier. Michaela asks, how do you change when all the factors are the same environment, financially, family, even if the factors of yourself have changed? How do you change when all the factors, you know what, Michaela, I think I am getting old and I'm not sure I fully understood that. Do you mind clarifying? Or you can just,
I mean, like, so you're in an environment where, you know, there's trauma or there's family issues or, you know, there's financial issues, and you've taken a second to like evaluate yourself, and maybe there's some parts of you that you weren't so fond of that you've now taken place into trying to change, but then you have all these extra things that are inevitable that you cannot control.
And so you're, I'm no, Michaela, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm having trouble with this question.
Can I interject?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm in journey between Michaela and you, perhaps. So this is my perspective, like from below and above. What she is asking is, if I interpret it is, if you have a family dynamics that you're already aware how it affects you, but you were given certain role that you want to take out of, like get yourself out. But because of the current situation and your family ties and your family loyalty or family care, you cannot take yourself out of that role. You're having a difficulty, but you know it's good for you to take out that role from you because it's not really your role. It's not really your job to get into the whirlpool of the family dynamics again when you already are safe and we're able to get out of it.
Does that?
You're not dependent anymore.
Yeah, no, I think I got that. I want to make sure that's also what Michaela was asking before I answer.
Yeah, one facet is family. You know, some of that could be financially or your career. You know, just being an adult and having all those other facets that kind of you know make it apparent to how you live as an adult or whatever. But I guess my question is, how do you get away from all those negative or triggering situations that kind of come with just, you know, all of those things?
Okay, so that's a good question. I think one of the things I want to talk about is family systems theory. So families are a system, and what that means is that just like any system, it all works together. It may not work well, right? Or joyfully sometimes, but it functions the way it is intended to. And the way a system works, particularly with a family, is that it tries to maintain the same structure that it always has. So you feel like you have certain roles growing up in your family. You become an adult, you're like, I don't want to do this role anymore. But your family is basically like, again, none of this is actually verbal, but your family's basically like, no, this is your role. This is the only role you get. And you're like, yeah, but I don't want to do it anymore. It doesn't do anything for me. How do you grow and change within that given structure? That absolutely makes it more challenging, but it's still very doable. And one of the pieces of that, again, it's like, you know, the metacognition and being aware of it. But one of the advantages of the system perspective is that if one part of the system changes, the other parts of the system also have to change. And that doesn't mean that it'll change for the better and everything will be miraculously beautiful. I don't want to say that, but the more you're able to do work on yourself, the more you're actually going to influence the way your family is, versus trying to get your family to change, which is just going to be so frustrating and triggering and upsetting, right? We can't stop them from being the way they are, but we can manage how we respond to that. And that's where we have power that we didn't have when we were growing up. So some of that, again, is just thinking about how our scripts play in, how we get triggered, and then before we react from that, to think about, okay, how do we want to respond? How do we want to be with these people? And I think going back to Michaela's question about sort of like, how do you do this when it's around things like financial, like, you know, we have a job we have to make money. We live in this capitalistic society that isn't actually mentally healthy for us, you know? There's a lot about this personal growth part, a lot about this awareness comes from the ability of, you know, the slide where we saw the river, right? That when we're standing in the flood of thoughts and feelings, including things like expectations and societal responsibilities, it's really hard to deal with that when we're standing in the middle of it. But again, through metacognition, self-awareness, through mindfulness, we can step to the side and see it pass by. So just as an example, I am actually at a point in my life where I'm changing the way I live my life completely. It's really challenging, but I'm able to do it, I think, because I've got this sense of self-awareness. I'm aware of what it is that I want, and I'm willing to take a step back and see, okay, this is my reactions to it. So for instance, the other day, I started feeling really overwhelmed with everything. And what I ended up doing was I use AI for mental health support. So I have a particular AI that I used. I told it what was going on. Even just the act of listing out everything that I was thinking about was really helpful because it looked overwhelming. So of course I felt overwhelmed. So even just that distance, I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. But in that interaction with this AI, I was able to remember, this is the life that I want for myself. Yes, it feels weird, it's uncomfortable, it's overwhelming. I don't necessarily know what I'm doing to make it this way, but this is what I've chosen. And because I've chosen it, the things that I see as being overwhelming all of a sudden don't feel quite so bad because this is what I want. So there is that piece of, yes, we have these societal expectations from our families, from our friends, from our jobs, from society itself. But there's also, we still have a choice of how we respond to those expectations, demands, responsibilities, etc. I hope that helped. So let's say Anonymous asked if you have a script where you react by being overly argumentative or confrontational, what would you recommend to break it? I know I sound like a broken record, but it's the same thing, right? The first step is being aware of it, building that metacognition, that sense of self-awareness, to know what are the types of situations that I am most likely to do that with. 2, why do I do that? What feeling is triggered within me to do this? And then 3, how can I pay attention to that and catch it? So again, that's that metacognition, that self-awareness piece, right? Because what that allows us to do is it then allows us choice, right? I'm really good at being defensive. It's, again, this is one of my scripts, right? Is being defensive. Someone says something, they think I did something wrong, and I'm just like, you know, and I'm not real happy about it. I don't really like it. And what I've had to do is to build that awareness so that I know, oh, look at that. I'm already reacting from a place of being triggered. And so let's take a breath. And this is where, again, that metacognition, where mindfulness, being able to see the river from the side instead of being flooded by the river, can really be helpful. It's no different than trying to change any other aspect of your scripts. It's just that, like, that argumentative, confrontational part just feels more explosive, but it's still based from, this is something that you learned growing up to protect yourself, and now it's no longer protecting you. Sarah asks about complex PTSD, and yeah, I mean, there's, I don't want to get too personal into your life, Sarah. We can talk about this another time if you'd like. Feel free to reach out. One thing I will say is the partners of people who have been through trauma, particularly if that trauma is more violent, do end up experiencing essentially a kind of vicarious trauma, because they're the ones that end up on the receiving end of these scripts, right? He's working from scripts. He's not doing it on purpose. He's not doing it because he's a bad guy, but he's still doing it. It still hurts. It's just not intentional or personal. And that's a real tough, it's a very difficult situation you're in, Sarah. And I think it's important to, and I apologize, I misread your thing wrong. I'm really sorry, Sarah. I remember seeing your comment in the meeting. You've got some work to do. Whether that's fair or not is a whole other issue, but you've got some work to do. You've experienced this trauma from him for a really long time. And now it's really your chance, obviously, to mourn, but also to deal with the impact that that had on you, the scars that it has left you, and be able to start that process of just not mourning, not just mourning, but also healing from it. I hope that helps. So Jeremy asks a good question. Are scripts always being written throughout our lives? And I say yes. And I say that because while we didn't write the ones that we grew up with, we do get to rewrite the ones we want to have now. And that is true. There's no question that we can change the way we respond to situations. And the reason that I say that, there's lots of reasons, but one of the reasons that I say that is because it is not who you are, it's what you learn to do. Who you are is different. And as long as you can start being more connected to who you are and being more aware of what your own wants and needs are, then you will be able to rewrite scripts. Again, I don't mean to make that sound like it's so simple, because it's not simple, but it is absolutely doable. And you don't need to delve into the depths of your past to be able to figure out how to do it. Tracy asks about art or EMDR. So for those of you that don't know, EMDR is eye movement desensitization and re-experiencing. I never remember exactly what it is, but it's a technique for dealing with particularly PTSD. It's very good. I've used it. I've found it to be very helpful. This is more of when you're having you have acute experiences that are really traumatic and triggering. EMDR can be really helpful on that front. On reprocessing, I always do re-experiencing. How funny is that? Thanks, Danielle. So yes, I think it's helpful. I'm pausing here, to be honest, because I have some interesting ideas about therapy. I think therapy is incredible. I think therapy is very powerful. And I think it can be incredibly useful in making the change that you want in life. I also think that making the changes in your life is not dependent upon therapy. I don't think you need a therapist to do this work. So would I recommend therapy? Sure. Do I think it's a requirement? No. Partly because 1, it's hard to find someone. 2, it's hard to find somebody good. 3, it can be really expensive. And at least you can get started without therapy in order to begin making some changes in your life. Okay, so that's all the Q&A. I think JC has a hand raised.
Actually, I'm trying to write it, but it's hard to write.
Okay.
When you said like about like people with post-traumatic syndrome, with something like that, so sometimes it affects people that are like most of us are more affected by having people around us that we recognize have those traumatic experience, and we don't know whether it's a reflection, or they're really, or we're trying to go around it because we try to understand the people that has the post-traumatic experience. And so it's like if you word like rumination, the rumination that sometimes get into our minds are like how we go about it without sabotaging ourselves or without minimizing ourselves or shrinking ourselves because of the people that has traumatic experience that we want to understand. So what is the best advice you would give if you think something along that line?
I'm sorry, can you?
Like for example, to go forward for your better future, right?
Yeah.
But then you have this on your back of your mind. The relationship you have are people that has this somehow reacting for the traumatic experience that you probably you're also exposed to, but like in a family dynamic, but you become aware of it already, but you're aware that there might not be that. But it's hard to think whether who really is aware or not, right? Because like of gaslighting and all the stuff.
Yeah.
So somehow, instead of ruminating how best to deal with it or something like that, what advice could you give? Like
So
you also said, like if the family change, part of the family change, you have to change, but it's not no guarantee that it will change for the better. But for some people, you want to change it for the better, so you kind of ruminating what's the best thing to do.
I mean, the challenge is we just don't have as much control over our families as we wish we did. And there's not a lot we can do about that. The thing that
but also we don't have control of other people. That like I think that's what that Paul and the Michaela question. Like you have that family, and then you have your own life now. Like you face with your job, your own family, new family life, or something like that, which you also don't have control. So how do you figure out which to control?
So
maybe, yeah, you answer it, control yourself.
I mean, that is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you.
the challenge, right, we have with our families is if we come from a family where there was trauma, we're probably not the only one that experienced trauma. We have siblings that experience trauma. We probably have parents that experience trauma. And we have grandparents that experience trauma. And the level of work that they've done on themselves probably varies quite a bit. And if you're doing the work and they're not, it can be really difficult. But that's where it really comes back to this sense of, like, we have control over how we want to deal with things. When we're reacting to our families, that's where we get into trouble, right? That's because we're still being triggered, which of course we are. It's a very difficult situation. But the more that we build our sense of awareness, the more that we can be able to have space between whatever happens and our responses to it, the better chance that we have of being who we want to be in those situations versus acting out of scripts that we learned when we were growing up. And I think another piece of that is this, and I know I keep coming back to it, but this self-care. If there are people in our family that we deal with that are challenging for us, and again, I don't necessarily even mean bad people, I just mean people that are struggling, who make it easier for us to struggle. Sure, we can cut them out of our lives, but that's a very extreme response. What we want to try and find is a way to balance our needs with the needs of being connected. And so maybe that's structuring how we get together a little bit differently. Maybe it's structuring how long we spend time together. It's thinking about, if you're going to spend time with family, how much more self-care activities you need to do before and after to make sure that you're kind of in your optimum mental state instead of already coming to a situation where you're depleted. So I would keep coming back to the idea that our families are the way they are. They're going to impact us. The only control that we have over that is working on ourselves, building our sense of self-awareness, and being able to choose our responses instead of just reacting to what it is that they do. I hope that helps. Okay, so it's 8:45. Y'all have stayed way over. There are no more questions in the Q&A. If you have other questions, feel free to just raise your hand and I can call on you. Otherwise, thank you so much for sticking around. This was great. So last call, any other questions? Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. This was really wonderful. Again, I appreciate your patience and sticking through the first 10, 15 frustrating, difficult minutes while we got all the tech stuff worked out. And I will reach out tomorrow through Meetup and through email to let you know about how to access the recording, which will be available for free, the slide deck, the self-care guide, whatever else I can think of. And yeah, and if you want to reach out to me, you can do that through Meetup. You can go to my website, buildonyourstrengths.com. I look forward to hearing from you and hopefully seeing you again in the coming weeks in future workshops. Okay, take care, everybody.